I hope the burden of my presentation is not going to be that problematic for you. Anyway, the project that I'm going to talk about is establishing a research center for adaptation to climate change. The institution is the Institute of Graduate Studies and Research, which is part of the University of Alexandria. We started in June 2011, and the project is planned for 3 years. Well, that's a night image from NASA about Egypt. I don't have to talk about pollution distribution, inhabited areas, and so on. That's the Nile Delta, and that's the Nile banks. We're talking here about the coastal area of the Nile Delta. We're talking about 6 governorates. We're talking about a quarter of the population of Egypt are living in these coastal areas. Since the 1990s, everybody's talking about the Nile Delta as being one of the most vulnerable areas to climate change. In the IPCC reports and everywhere, everybody's talking about it. But the problem is, when we started, we found out that most of the work that has been done on the Nile Delta has focused on the physical impacts. Typically, what are the areas that will be inundated? And the number of people who will be affected. The issue with the number of people who will be affected and the investment and loss and damage, or the people who are talking about present population. Nobody did projections about the future, which didn't make sense, because it's not, we're talking about the risk in the future, not about the risk to the people right now. And also, most of them talked about hypothetical scenarios. What if we're talking about a sea level rise of 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters, and what we have here are wetlands, coastal wetlands. And in each of these papers, they were talking about wetlands being inundated. So nobody actually was talking about socioeconomic vulnerabilities. We need to talk about 20, 30, 50, and 2100. But the population and the sort of investment at that time, in order to be able to talk about the number of people who will be affected, as well as the sort of damage to expect at that time. Nobody talked about adaptation options. Or the externalities associated with various adaptation options. How much will it cost? Is it worth doing or not? And finally, as I was saying, wetlands are not going to be inundated. Actually, the ecosystem will change. Will it change will it be an opportunity or a problem? Nobody knows. Our objectives for the project were, we're talking about establishing a center, so we needed to have institutional capacities for the research at the center. we needed also that content research capacity supported. That involved training workshops. A large part of the project involved capacity building activities for researchers in different disciplines. Actually, without involving the policy makers, what are we doing? We would be just repeating what researchers have been doing. They're doing research for the purpose of doing research. And typically for us researchers, we expect politicians and decision makers to sit and wait until we make sure that we are totally satisfied with the research that we're doing. We are publishing our work, and then they can take over the results and just implement it. And it never works, but we're still adapting to that. Then we're talking about conducting research work that can support knowledgeable decision and policy maker that ultimately will lead to the overall objective of the center. In terms of our activities, as I said, capacity building activities is a major component. So far we have conducted 22 workshops. We had applicants of more than 850, and we trained more than 400 researchers and stakeholders in different disciplines. This is the affiliation of the participants and the training activities. We're talking about researchers from different universities, as well as people from ministries. Ministry WEAA, which is the Environmental Egyptian Affairs Agency. We're talking about the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Scientific Research, Ministry of Irrigation, and NGOs. In terms of research activities, our focus was on economics of adaptation to climate change and sea level rise, assessing the potential impacts of vulnerability and adaptation options, and reviewing the status of climate change and sea level rise research that has been undertaken in Egypt before the project. We had in mind that no one place can come up and say that they are working or covering all the topics related to climate change. So what we had in mind is working or acting more like a hub to climate research, climate change research. So what we have is research activities conducted by ARCA core team members. We have research grants for graduate students. We have also small research grants holders. And we have some people working with us concerning identifying and assessing the gaps of research concerning climate change in different disciplines. Challenges: we have to deal with the dynamic, physical, and socio-economic situation. In order to conduct work on the economics of climate change, you need to have physical, biophysical, ecosystem assessments that can feed in the economics of climate change, and we didn't have any of that. So part of our work is getting some researchers to work on these topics. Like we have one small research grant awarded to a student, a researcher working on the ecosystem of the wetlands. What will happen under different scenarios of climate change and sea level rise. Another is working on biodiversity in the Mediterranean. Because one of the surprises that we had in a previous project was that some of the fishermen that we interviewed were talking about catching some of the fish species that actually or typically are found in the Red Sea, not in the Mediterranean. So that shows that there is a shift for some of the species, and we needed to know what's happening and what sort of impact this will have on the fish stock in the Mediterranean. We need out today the reliable and desegregated data. Most people talked about this issue. But like in here, we're talking about working at the local level, at the locality level. You need information about income levels. The only thing that we found is we had GDP per capita at local level for only the year 2000. Just one shot, and that's it. No more information. A lot of work required field surveys and conducted field work when considering working at the local and community levels. One of the problems that we had is the misconception of the people about the climate change and sea level rise, especially sea level rise. Everyone is talking about sea level rise in the year 2100. It's going to happen in 2100. Actually, it's going to be a gradual. It's not going to suddenly just change in 2100. So people were not concerned. A lot of people at the community and local level were not concerned because it's in the very far future, so you don't have to worry about this. The other problem that we had is a lot of people talk about sea level rise, the areas that will be inundated, and each of them, as I said, we're talking about hypothetical rise in sea level. When they talk in the media and so on, they talk about the scale of areas to be inundated without actually discussing the underlying hypothesis that they are building their work on, which is getting mixed signals to the policymakers and the individuals. It's also, we're talking about, more or less, we're talking about the level of the delta, the Nile Delta coastal area. That's our area of work, which is quite large. This is the sort of topics that we are trying to cover. As I said, some ourselves, some people from different institutes and entities. Some of the work has already been completed, some is work in progress. And I'm going to give you just 2 examples of the work that we have conducted. The areas in red are the areas that are expected to be inundated by sea level rise under the A1FI scenario. That's the Rabo sorts food scenario. These are the areas that will be inundated. And that's for fever. But what we considered also is, part of the problem with the Nile Delta is land is subsiding. So it's not just about sea level rise. Land is subsiding, which means that even without sea level rise, actually the red areas are the areas that will be inundated, even without any sea level rise. And this is the sort of the area in square kilometers and area as a percentage. As I said, the wetlands represent large chunk of the areas that we will be affected by sea level rise. In a previous project we worked on, people were talking all the time about inundation of the Nile Delta. Actually, what we found out is there's a more serious problem, which is saltwater intrusion. We already have a problem with high groundwater levels in the delta, and with the saltwater intrusion, this will be a serious problem. This is the study area that we covered. It's in the eastern side of the Nile Delta. That's how the areas these are the areas that will be affected by high levels of groundwaters in this governorate. This will affect agricultural activities and agricultural yield. In most crops, we found that it will be declining depending on the area of the crop, and also the susceptibility of the crop itself to groundwater levels. The cumulative decline in the yield due to saltwater intrusion was found to be 6.4 billion Egyptian pounds. We're talking about like $1 billion. The thing in here is we haven't included the impact, which is expected to be significant on tree plantation. We didn't have figures for that. So that the actual impact will be higher than that. And one of the adaptation options, a number of adaptation options has been considered, but one of the most promising ones is to improve efficiency of the drainage system. Improve the efficiency and increase the capacity of the drainage system and upgrading the water pumping stations. The expected cost of that is like 290 million Egyptian pounds. By comparison, we're talking about 4.5% of the actual cost or the damage that would be expected. As I said at the beginning, that we're trying to get the policy and decision makers on board from the very beginning. So signed MOUs with a number of government agencies, and the body that's responsible for climate change issues in Egypt is the Ministry of Environment. And we have signed an MOU with them to provide them with the training, capacity building activities, and also to do joint work and research work depending on the topics they consider of great importance. A lot of times we talk about vulnerability and the impacts and vulnerabilities. Actually, policymakers are not just interested in impacts and vulnerabilities. They are interested in what should be done. And we're trying to create some potential cross-discipline, cross-institution collaboration with these bodies. From the private sectors, we try to involve them as well. We're providing them with training, we're trying to identify the issues of concern from them and work at the local level with these people. The local communities, the issue of higher groundwater levels in the Nile Delta, as I said, is already present, but the significance of the problem will increase. So people already have experience about that, and they are doing some autonomous adaptation. We need to work on that with them, so that we don't have to start from scratch and talk about large-scale government activities and so on. And we're trying to create more interactions with with the researchers in different disciplines. And I can just say that the 4 small research grants that we have provided so far are actually people who have been involved in our training activities. Thank you.
I think instead of having